apologies, Councillor Hughes, substitute Councillor Shelley, Councillor Maelstrom, apologies, and Councillor Buttle, but he hasn't arrived yet as substitute.
Thank you. Are there any interests at this point that members would like to publicly declare that need to be recorded? Councillor Peacock.
I'd just like to declare a meeting with the landowner in item 5.3.
That's the last application, is it, Lucy? Yeah, thank you. Having had that meeting, is there any parameters in terms of Councillor Peacock having...
Do you want to come in and say something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just to remind all members that any time a declaration of interest is submitted, it's up to you as members to assess whether that does have an effect in your capability to attend meetings and debate, and therefore vote on on meetings. And that goes for Councillor Peacock, who's raised a declaration of interest tonight, and any member that raises any interest. So if you do feel that it does affect your ability to vote, then you have to excuse yourself if it is a pecuniary interest.
My apologies, members, I jumped the gun. If we look at number 2 on the agenda, we need to approve the minutes of the 2 previous meetings. That's the meetings of June the 10th and the special meeting that was held here on the 24th of June. So, first of all, are members happy that the minutes of the meeting that was held on June the 10th is a true and a correct record of what there and therein took place? Councillor Dobbs.
I'm happy for June the 10th. It's June the 24th. I'd like to highlight...
We'll get to that in a moment then.
Yep.
So will someone kindly move, if you're happy that that is a true and correct record, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Slack. All those in favour, please show. And that appears to be Neil. We're voting on the minutes of the 10th of June.
I assume we changed the voting numbers because...
No, this is the first. This is
Right, okay, yeah.
yeah. So you.
Sorry about being late.
No, that's okay. So it is unanimous. Thank you. So then we now turn to the meeting that was held on the 24th of June. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out, I think that it's where it says 3 abstentions, it should read 3 against.
Angela, do you wish to comment on that?
So page 18.
Yeah.
I'll have to go and look at the meeting. I mean,
Right. So if members turn to page 18, we need to correct, because you're absolutely right, that was my understanding, Peter, that they were not abstentions, but against. Our members, Councillor Buttle.
I'm sorry, David, but I thought you abstained.
It was later, I genuinely thought that in this role, I just had a casting vote, and it was pointed out to me that, in fact, I can legitimately vote. So, on being asked, I declared the way that I would have voted. So I did, in fact, support the motion. Is there anything else on that at all that... So, would you be prepared on the basis of that, Peter, to move it as a correct record?
Happy to move that as a corrected record, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Does that find a second? Councillor Lee, is all those in favour, please show. Against that again is, and declaring you weren't present, Councillor Shelley, so that's just an abstention. Thank you. Right. If we move to 5, I think everyone that is present in the public are listed in terms of speaking. So we will move to applications for determination. And the first application is found from page 19 to 26 of the agenda, which pertains 23 the Parkway, Darley Dale, for a single-storey rear extension. And some members took time yesterday to visit and assess the site and listen to the case officer's planning view for this particular application, which is obviously contained also in your report in front of you. So I need to call upon, do we have a speaker for this, Angela, or not? No. We don't. So it's really then the case officer, please, if you'll outline.
Thank you. I just want to check my presentation's up. Great, thank you. We did receive in the late correspondence a note from the agent, which has been circulated. So hopefully members have had an opportunity to read that. They're just countering some of the objections. So our first site today is at 23 the Parkway in Darley Dale, which is for a single-storey rear extension. So here's the site which most of the members visited yesterday. It's on a corner plot. It's a single-storey. It's a bungalow from the 1960s with a separate detached garage. So it has an existing conservatory to the rear, but the proposal is to put a full-width single-storey extension to the back, which is 3.8 metres deep and 11.1 metres wide. It's got a dual pitch gable, which would be vertically clad in timber, cedar timber, and grey roof tiles. Ordinarily, you wouldn't see an application of this scale because generally extensions of this size are what constitutes permitted development. But the only reason it's in front of you today is because the only reason we've got a planning application today is because the materials don't match, because the PD only allows you to have matching materials to your property. So the extension is more than 5 metres from the common boundary. There's also a garage with separation and a boundary fence. Having assessed the application, we don't think there's any impact on residential amenity. There's windows to the rear, but they all face the own back garden. So we're recommending this for approval with just the two standard conditions, that it's granted for 3 years and it will be in accordance with the approved plans.
Thank you very much. So it's open now for questions. Are there any specific questions, perhaps out of the site visit or from what you've read? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of questions about overlooking. It's overlooking from large windows and doors across the rear of the extension. The size and the mass of the extension will be imposing for people to use in the garden. So, have you any answer to them questions?
So here's the rear view. You can see that they have got large windows, but they are orientated down the garden. So you see them there. So that plan there, but they've got good distances to the boundary, over 5 metres, and there's the 6-foot boundary fence. And obviously they're both bungalows as well. So all you'd be able to see from the neighbour's property would be the roof of this extension.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions from members? If not, we have before us an officer recommendation to approve this application. Is anyone prepared to move it? Councillor Peacock and Councillor Butter, you'll second that. Thank you. It's now just open for members to pass comment or...
Yes, I'd like to move the officer recommendation. I'm particularly... I wouldn't like to set a precedent that if somebody tries to use sustainable materials in their permitted development extension, that then it's likely to be refused. I think we should absolutely approve this.
Thank you. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to second that. I think it was very interesting to go to the site visit yesterday to see the actual size of the site and also to see or to try and evaluate what the impact would be on number 21. I think just to reiterate what Rosie said, this wouldn't have needed planning permission at all if it hadn't been that this extension was going to be clad in timber, and I really can't see any material planning reason to turn this down. In fact, I would say that it would be an improvement. So I'm more than happy to second it for approval.
It has been seconded to by
Oh, right, sorry.
Councillor
Sorry,
Buttle.
yeah.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I know that the local council, Darley Dale, have no objections to this application. It was very useful to go to site yesterday. It's a good site. It's not overlooked by anybody. It'll be a great improvement, I believe, to have this extension. I wasn't going to say this, but I did think that some of the objections were quite spurious, to be honest, because once we actually visited the site and had a look around, I just thought I couldn't find one that really stood up, to be honest. So, yeah, I support the officer's recommendation on this one.
Any final comments from members? If not, then let's put it to the vote, please. All those in favour of officer recommendation to approve this application, please show. And that appears to be unanimous. Thank you. We turn then to the second application, which is found on pages 27 to 40. This pertains the old schoolhouse, Wellbanks, Kirk Ireton. Again, this was a site visit yesterday, and it pertains variation of condition 2 of application number 23/00885, erection of dwelling house and associated works, and the recommendation from the case officers that members refuse this application. Thank you. So can I invite John Hargreaves, please? You're a local resident, I understand, John, and you're going to speak against this application, and you've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, members of the Planning Committee, thank you for giving me time to speak this evening. Prior to the approved application in 2024, the initial submitted design was for a 4-bedded property. The officers deemed this not to be in character by virtue of scale, height and design. Considerable amendments and negotiations took place at that time in order to achieve a reduced 3-bedded dwelling, which was approved at this meeting last year. The plot of land has since been sold, and we now see this application for a property which is even larger than the initial design submitted in the original application, which at that stage was deemed to be too large. Compared with the approved design, the amendments suggest an increase in the building footprint of over 200%, an increase in length of nearly 100%, increase in width 15%, height 13%, and an increase of the ridge height from 0.8 metres to 1.7 metres above the adjacent footpath. This will make the building far more conspicuous when on the footpath, blocking out the outstanding views across the Ecclesbourne Valley. Some drawings show the ridgeline is the same, but there are a number of inaccuracies in the plan, so it's actually hard to have any clear perspective of what the actual height will be, especially as the hedge line is being used as a benchmark. Thus, I consider the scale, height and design overbearing, which will dominate the adjacent properties. It's totally out of character and not in keeping with this part of the conservation area. I note that the Conservation Officer has recommended refusal, commenting that the amended design does not take into account the local distinctive character and setting of the conservation area. and would likely have a harmful impact on the character of the conservation area and the setting of the listing building that's adjacent to the property. Indeed, all the previous Conservation Officer's recommendations seem to have been overlooked in this latest submission. The amendment's been submitted to avoid excessively high retaining walls, but the design suggests a lot more excavation will now be required. The increased size of the building will actually require considerably more excavation, which will have a major impact on the narrow lanes of Kirk Ireton with lorry movements, etc. The applicant will have known about the required works at this site as he lives locally, so why now use this as a reason to seek the amendment plans and also submit for a larger property? In the approved design, the officer's report states that the openness of the site adds positively to the area's character and appearance, with the site acting as a breathing space within the built-up area. The significant increase in size reduces this open green space, which has a negative impact upon those benefits, as well as impacting on the local flora and fauna. Thus I request that the amended plans be refused, as the previously approved plans offer a far more attractive building that blends into the landscape, as opposed to a large, modern-style property not in keeping with the Kirk Ireton Conservation Area.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
spot on time, Mr. Hargreaves. Thank you very much. And then the other speaker is Darren Archer, Channel Design Limited Architects, agent, again speaking in favour of this application.
Good evening. We would like to ask the council to defer a decision on this application. The applicants live in the village and fully appreciate this site has been controversial in history. They did not decide lightly to submit a revised application. However, the application that has been approved has significant technical issues which have either been overlooked or not fully addressed, meaning the construction of it will be overly complex and extremely disruptive to the village. Time is short and the issue is complex, but I will try and keep the explanation of the issues as detailed and short as possible. The house design itself, while not ideal, for example, most, if not all of the rooms have no or very poor natural daylight, it can't be right in this day and age of carbon reduction and climate emergencies to design and build a house where the lights will have to be turned on in every room regardless of what time of day it is. But that is not the critical issue. Parking is. The approval shows a parking area located in the northeast corner of the site, at its closest 2.5 metres away from the neighbouring bungalow. The measured survey provided with the previous application shows the road level, and therefore presumably the parking level, as 195.57 metres above sea level. The survey gives the floor level of the adjacent bungalow as 200.5 metres, a difference of just under 5 metres. What this means in its simplest terms is the approval calls for a hole 5 metres deep to be dug just 2.5 metres away from the neighbouring bungalow. Obviously we can't just dig the hole and hope the neighbour in its garden doesn't slide into it, which means a retaining wall. Actually, on the approved plans, 2 retaining walls are shown at just over 18 metres long. The approved drawing states the wall is to be a traditional stone retaining wall. Indeed, the finish may be stone, but at 5 metres tall, the retaining part will not be stone, it will be concrete. Furthermore, the excavation cannot be carried out until the bungalow and everything else on the other side of the boundary is retained. The only way to do that is for a contiguous piled steel retaining wall to be formed before the excavations begin. I appreciate the committee may not be familiar with the nitty-gritty of contiguous piling, but I can assure you hammering 8-metre long sections of mild steel into the ground along the boundary for 2 to 3 weeks every day from 8 until 4 is going to be very disruptive, noisy and impactful on anyone within earshot. Then there is the concrete for the retaining walls. At 18 metres long, to form 2 retaining walls is going to need in excess of 125 cubic metres of concrete, which means around 18 to 25 concrete lorry loads delivered to site. The revised application relocates the parking under the building, similar to the neighbouring properties, moving the excavation away from the neighbour, now at its closest just over 10 metres away, greatly simplifying the construction in the process and the impact on the neighbour and disruption to the village. No contiguous piling needed. The revised proposals were discussed at length with the previous planning officer at a pre-app meeting on site last December, where the size, form, height, etc. were agreed. I appreciate that since then the officer has left and a new officer has taken on the application. We also understand the new officer has issued many only minor, has some issues with the design, many only minor. But most such as window size, chimney position, roof lights, door styles, etc. are very simple and can be easily and quickly resolved, which is why we ask for the application to be deferred, so we can sit down with a new officer, discuss and resolve the issues they have raised, to reach a scheme that can be built with the minimum of impact on the village. I'd also like to clarify, the proposal is exactly the same height as the currently approved one, and the excavated footprint is exactly the same as the currently approved. So there will be no more excavation, and it's no taller than you have already granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll invite the case officer then to
Thank you, Chair. So as you heard, this is the application at the old schoolhouse, and it's to vary condition 2 of the planning permission that was approved in April last year. So that's to vary the plans condition. So we've approved a dwelling on this site, so it's been approved in principle. So members visited the site yesterday, and I think it's been out before. It is notable by its topography. It's considerably higher by the footpath at the top of the site than the road, it's in a prominent spot in the conservation area. The whole of Kirk Ireton is covered by a conservation area, so it is a very sensitive and a prominent site. The proposal is to vary condition 2, which was the approved plans. So these are the new plans that we have in front of us tonight, which we don't think are acceptable. It's for a larger dwelling. It's a 4-bedroom property, which covers a larger footprint. It's got a larger scale and massing. As I mentioned, it's a 4-bedroom property, whereas the one which was approved was 3. There's an introduction of roof lights. It's got a new carport arrangement instead of the previous car park arrangements. And it's also, the realignment in the plot has also changed. So here is what was approved before. So you can see that there was the car parking area, which the agent mentioned, separate to the front, and it occupied a much smaller footprint. And here is what it looked like as a 3-bedroom dwelling. So as I mentioned, it's in a conservation area, so that's one of the key considerations about how it fits in. Another consideration is highways impact, and also obviously design and residential amenity issues, which are covered in the report. As mentioned, the conservation officer has raised an objection to it, and we as planning officers have concerns about the revised designs. We don't think it's appropriate. It's got untraditional features such as a carport, which is inappropriate in a conservation area location. The bulk and scale and mass of it, it just occupies a lot more of the plot than the previous dwelling. And officers worked very hard on the previous scheme to get that in a position where we could recommend approval of that scheme, and this seems to have gone back in the other direction. So the officer's report lists quite a few design concerns that we have with the scheme. The fact that it's a lot larger and longer, sort of the potential impact on the listed old schoolhouse next door, the chimney design, the window design, it's all changed substantially from the previously approved design. And we have concerns about the impact that it will have on the conservation area. So our recommendation tonight is to refuse it on the basis of its siting, design, form, scale and mass, and the impact that that will have on the character and appearance of the conservation area. We've also got a second reason for refusal, because insufficient information has been provided to demonstrate that there's adequate space for turning vehicles within the plot. So that would be contrary to policy HC19 of the plan as well.
Okay, thank you, Rosie, for your outline. Now, members, it's open for questions. This was the second site visit yesterday. Anything out of that John?
Thank you. Listening to Mr. Archer, he seems to have abandoned the idea of these plans, if I'm reading correctly what he said. So the way forward, would it be to go with the officer recommendation and let a new application be forthcoming, or to defer it for a further discussion with yourselves to re-amend these plans again?
Rosie.
So as I showed before, the approved plans, I've just put them on the screen again. So we got to a point that was acceptable. I think what we've had in front of us, which also follows a pre-app, is something that's unacceptable. And our concern as officers is that the architect would just chip away at the design they've got rather than come up with something new. We accept, that they could have an alternative scheme to what's been approved, but the one that's been put in front of us isn't acceptable, so should be refused. And they're welcome to try again and put another application in.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, going back to what John's just said, I think getting something suitable is going to be a totally different design to what's in front of us. Can you just confirm that, obviously, we've been told the ridge height is the same height as the original planning application. Is the land being dug out any further down, or is the land, the baseline still going to be the same? The footprint of the footings? Ground floor, should I say, sorry.
Look at the plans at as much detail on.
It just looks a higher
Yeah, I mean, as you
build,
can see,
so is it being dug into the ground more?
as you can see on both of them, it involves quite a lot of excavation, because we saw on the site it's a very sloped site. You are going to have to excavate quite considerably. So it's shown as sort of like all the ground floor, pretty much a line goes through it, and when you can see the land on either side is higher.
And is that rear wall, is that going to be used as the retaining wall? For the
Yeah,
property?
it looks that way from the plans.
Yeah, right, thank you.
Councillor Buttle.
Oh, thank you, David. Rosie, does the volume of the approved house have any relevance whatsoever to our judgment? Should we take any notice whatsoever of the approved house's size in comparison to the latest iteration?
No, we have to consider what's in front of us today on its own merits, but I was just illustrating what we had before worked, whereas we feel this doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. I also have some doubt about the fact it seems to be like 2.5 times the volume of what it was. And I can see why they would choose to spend more money on digging out than putting up land retention details, and I understand how they would get to that. My question, I suppose, about the deferral is, what is the advantage to us to choose a deferral, and what is the advantage to them? Like, would it cost less for them to bring things forward through pre-application advice and a reapplication? And would we be better off if we just said, yeah, come back with a fresh plan, and we'll be interested to see what you bring forward?
Obviously, a new application would trigger a new planning application fee, which is not necessarily a motivation of ours. We do work with applicants where we, see that minor alterations would approve a scheme, but with this, there needs to be substantial changes. So that's why we're asking, that's why we're refusing this, and we'd look at a new application afresh.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Dobbs and then Councillor Slack.
Just picking up on Neil's point, I mean, I was confused and surprised that this was a VCOMD rather than a new application, because it does present as being very different to what we previously approved. To be perfectly honest, if finance is not an issue, it sounds to me that it's much cleaner arrangement if we go with officer recommendation than we come back with a new application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Councillor Slack.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the officer's recommendation. I think it's going to be a very big project when it comes back again. There's an enormous lot of concrete that they're going to be put in there. So, yeah, so we look forward to the new plans going forward eventually. Thank you.
Any final questions? If not, is someone prepared to move? Councillor Dermot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to go with officers' recommendations on this one. For me, it's not really, it needs to be a new application. It's so vastly different, and, it's just not a variation to conditions for me. And and it's going to be so out of keeping with that area, that conservation area. I don't think it brings anything in its current design to the area, so I'm going to go with officer's recommendation.
And forgive my ignorance, you are the ward member, aren't you, Dermot, for Kirk
Yeah.
Ireton? Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Dobbs. So it is now open for members to debate or to just simply support the recommendation to refuse. Councillor G.
Yeah, from what I see with this, I think it's much cleaner, as Councillor Dobbs has pointed out, to go with officers' recommendations. I think, you know, I've got nothing against modernity in old villages, but also I think the developers need to respect old villages and come up with something better, because clearly they haven't tried hard enough to listen to what we're asking them to do. So I think they need to go back to the drawing board and come up with something much better. And just by deferring it, you're not going to get that. You're just going to get a slippery slope to something that's not that much better. So we need something completely new. So, yeah, I support officers' recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor J. Any further comments? Are members happy then that we take the vote then? It's been moved and seconded that this application be refused. All those in favour, please show. And that, members, is unanimous. Thank you. Turn then to the final application, which commences on page 41 of your agenda. And this pertains land to the north of Jacksons Ley, Middleton by Wirksworth, residential development of 57 numbered dwelling houses. And the recommendation is that the authority be delegated to the development manager or principal manager officer to grant planning permission subject to conditions as outlined.
Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Mark.
So I think Rosie's passed you the
What is it?
No, that's the recommendation. The previous one.
Oh, sorry.
I'll just very quickly clarify, Chair. So
Yeah, please.
there's two reports in the agenda. One is the original report when it came to committee originally, and then there's the updated new, quite brief report explaining why we're recommending refusal of the current application.
Right, sorry, please.
Thanks, Chair.
Will you just outline then? That, thank you. No, I.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this application before you tonight is the residential development 57 dwellings, land north of Jacksons Ley, Middleton by Wirksworth. So this application, some of you remember, came in front of you, Planning Committee on the 14th of November 2023, and members resolved to give officers delegated authority to approve the application.
Yeah. I do apologise for the confusion to the speakers. We should take you first. So please, can I call first of all, before we continue with the officer report, Kenneth Gray, please, local resident. And Kenneth, I understand you're going to speak against the application. Yeah. You've got 3 minutes as and when you wish to share your comments.
Thank you. This development is to be on land which at the moment is a thriving wildlife corridor, which only exists due to historic lead mining which took place in these fields. Contamination from mining spoils curtailed any agriculture and hence allowed wildlife to prosper. Already, due to preliminary work on the site, wildlife has been reduced. No longer do we see and hear owls and buzzards patrolling the fields for a snack, or bats feeding at dusk, and the large flock of goldfinches have been much reduced to 3 or 4. If this planning application is passed, which I hope not, My main concern will be for the lovely mature hedgerow between the north boundary of Jacksons Ley estate and the new Woodhall development. The hedgerow and hedgerow trees were a council planning requirement and were planted by Wheeldon's, the Jacksons Ley developer, in 2016. Unfortunately, the hedgerow and hedgerow trees at the moment have no legal protection from the latest developer. Surely, if this was a planning requirement for the first developer, it should be the same for the second developer. Fortunately, the hedgerow bushes are rooted on our side of the boundary line and are safe from the chainsaw, whilst the hedgerow trees are on the opposite side of the boundary line and are in danger. Woodall's plans show that these healthy trees are to be cut down, but have not mentioned how many, probably in order to keep it quiet. I have taken time to count them, and there is approximately 45, and that's a lot of trees. My other worry is that after felling these trees, what is there to stop them trimming back any hedgerow bushes that cross the boundary line, as any thinning of the hedgerow would greatly reduce the viability of the hedge for nesting birds, which we have had this year. This hedgerow is at the boundary of the site and not in the way of development. In my opinion, if they have to cut the hedge trees back at all, they must be trying to cram too many houses on the available land. In fact, when you look at the plans and compare the new development with Jacksons Ley, it is self-evident that they have. I am very surprised that this has been allowed by the Council Planning Department, especially in a conservation area. Please, please save the hedgerow and hedgerow trees for the birds and other wildlife. Remember, they don't have a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I'll ask Jennifer Gray now, please. Again, local resident, to speak against the application, please. And Jennifer, you've got 3 minutes as well.
Good evening. We have repeatedly been told that Jacksons Ley estate and the adjoining fields are in a conservation area. Due to this, planning requirements mean that the houses in Jacksons Ley had to be built with a mix of stone and render in order to blend in with the village of Middleton. Furthermore, it was a requirement that false chimney stacks had to be fitted to each house, even though none of the units have fireplaces built in. So with this in mind, how come the developer can build on this conservation land with houses that don't blend in with Jacksons Ley, never mind the village? Our other concern is the number of units the developer is trying to fit onto what was a fabulous wildlife corridor. Jacksons Ley consists of 46 houses and was built on a derelict industrial site, which was a bit of an eyesore, and turned it into a lovely estate with plenty of green spaces. This much improved the visual approach to the village, whereas Woodalls are trying to cram 57 houses onto this small piece of land, whose area is much reduced by the old mine shafts. You only have to look at the plans submitted to notice the huge difference in housing density between Jacksons Ley and the Woodall site. Following on from this, I can also envisage a problem with car parking due to the excess homes packed together with little off-road parking. We have even experienced this on the more open Jacksons Ley, with cars parked partially on the pavement. Last Sunday, I counted 10. The new development appears to have given even less thought to this problem. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mrs. Gray. And you're absolutely right. I remember the former, was it haulage and repairs, and it was a very dirty site. And you're absolutely right. I think that whole area is far more attractive. That aspect but I do hear what you're saying pertaining what you hear about tonight. Rosie, in a little while, could you actually read out, so, because I think some of us haven't got the correct recommendation, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll let you carry on where you.
Certainly, that's fine, Chair. Thank you. So the report that I'm presenting to you tonight is just a 2-page report. Appended to it was the original report that came to Planning Committee back in November 2023. So my report's just 2 pages and a recommendation for refusal, but simply on the basis of the Section 106 having not been signed. So in the report, I've outlined that it went to committee on the 14th of November. It had heads of terms for a legal agreement, which was to secure 17 affordable homes, 51,300 for healthcare, another £8,327.70 for parks and gardens, and an allotment contribution of £3,368.70 for allotments. So obviously, when members resolved to approve that application in November 2023, these planning obligations were sought to be reasonable against the national tests and the community infrastructure regulations levy, which makes to ensure that all contributions are fair, they're relevant and necessary and directly related to the development. So these would have mitigated the impact of the development by providing affordable housing, providing play space and those allotments. So collectively they mitigated for the 57 houses, but without that we're not in a position to recommend approval of it. We can't issue a decision notice today because they haven't made those, they haven't signed the Section 106 agreement, and we understand there's unwillingness of the party to do that. So the only recommendation we can put forward you today, notwithstanding members resolved to approve this previously, is to refuse the application on the basis of the lack of legal agreement.
Thank you, Rosie. Now, I'm mindful that 2 of the 3 ward members are present, Councillor Slack and Councillor Peacock. I'll invite Peter to ask questions, please. Lucy, do you want to follow Peter at all on questions?
Thank you. Thank you for informing me yesterday about. I believe up till that point, I believe there was affordable housing on it. Now it's gone. In fact, it was never on the document, were it really? So it was never. I agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's got to be refused. There's no affordable housing on it. The site is, as the lady said, it was cramped, and there should have been more car parking spaces. But overall, it was a reasonable site. But without affordable housing, I'd like to refuse it. Recommend put it forward for refusal.
Okay, it's Councillor Shelley and then Councillor Dobbs, please. And remind members it is questions, please.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Do we know why the landowners are not prepared to sign up to the necessary legal agreement?
Alongside from Rosie, I took a call and correspondence from the agent a few weeks ago, just quite plainly stated they would not be signing the Section 106 agreement and asked for the application to be determined. I advised them really clearly that the only recommendation would be refusal, and they said, yes, please determine the application. I have no idea the motivation behind that course of action. It may not be planning related, but they have stated in writing they will not sign the Section 106, and therefore we have no alternative but to recommend refusal. Just a very quick side note as we come on to it, it's recommended refusal to members on the failure to make contributions and to meet the Section 106 agreement. Members are perfectly free to make the decision they want to make. But it would be dangerous to revisit the principles and fundamentals of the development. It's been to committee, there's been a resolution to approve, and there is now this significant failure to meet contributions, so that is a sound reason for refusal. If it is refused tonight and they were to reapply at any point in the future, then members would be quite entitled to revisit all the fundamentals, all the principles, all the issues, design, nature, protected species, etc., but what's in front of you tonight is their failure to meet the contributions. And if you were to vote to refuse on that basis, that's a very safe, sound decision. And I would just urge them to not introduce additional reasons for refusal at this stage tonight. Thank you.
Please, members, be very mindful of the comments that Mark's just expressed, and I totally would support the position that is advising members. So it's Councillor Dobbs now and Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I must confess this item confuses me immensely, because to my way of thinking, and I was at the previous meeting, we made the planning balance judgment then based upon certain S106 related contributions. And in my head, which is probably not the best place planning wise to be, but in my head, it's then a legal thing to get the S106 over the line. And in a sense, I don't quite know why we're making a legal judgment. And if I could add to that, I find the lack of information on the portal as to how we got to this point somewhat troubling, bearing in mind there seems to be more information in the public domain with respect to a newspaper article than we actually have before us.
Well, I'll answer that very quickly. So I think it is relevant because it came to committee before. It's good practice and it's appropriate and for it to come back to committee for the decision tonight. And the lack of contributions is a bit more than a legal test. It means that in the planning balance we have no contributions, no affordable housing, no mitigation for the impact. So in the planning balance then, in our view, tips completely against the development, and that's recommended for refusal. So there's still a planning decision to make. And then I can genuinely say that I'm not aware of any information other than the agent advising us they won't sign the 106. I've not been given any information as to why they will or won't. So I don't think there's particularly any more information to go in the public domain from the council's end or from the planning department's end that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Can I just put in a supplementary? Because obviously this business of number of affordable housing house units to be built comes up endlessly countrywide, and it's usually a sort of negotiation. And yet, because of what we presented, it's 17 or nothing, and that is the bewildering point that I don't understand. Presumably it tracks back to money, but we're given no guidance other than the absence of this, which is difficult to come to a sort of balanced decision on. Set 60, I would imagine that in normal debates of this nature, then there's a toing and froing. There's none of that on the portal. So it's a sort of very strange situation for me. Incidentally, Woodall Homes still advertise this as coming soon.
No, the developer has put on the table no contributions of any sort and asked us to determine the application. So we've made a recommendation of refusal.
Can I just explain? We've got Councillor Murphy, Councillor Buttle, and then Councillor G. So, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had dialogue with the agents, and at no stage have they sort of mentioned about viability or any other issues. They've been very tight-lipped on the reasons for.
No, it's been very, very brief and just, can you please determine our application? And I will say it's an unusual situation. In my 25 years in planning, I don't think I've ever come across it before. And speaking to our legal team, they hadn't come across the situation either. So it's a very unusual situation. And you'd normally think a hard-fought and hard-won planning permission, all you've got to do is sign a Section 106 agreement. You would do that because the risk to the developers, if you refuse tonight and they come back in 6 months with a new application, you would be entitled to revisit all the fundamental principles of that application. So they're taking that risk.
Yes, because they'll have spent a small fortune getting it over the line, won't they? Right, okay. Well, thanks for that.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Mark. I remember this one quite vividly. I was very reluctant to go with the officer recommendation at the time to accept with Section 106, but I really couldn't see any way around it, so I went with that. So I kind of feel this is quite good news because it's going to give us a fresh chance to get what suits the area. again at some point in the future. I am like Mr. and Mrs. Gray had concerns about their trees and the trees along their boundary line. Is there anything we can do in the interim period to protect those from developers while things are up in the air?
Well, it's completely separate to this meeting tonight, but the council has a tree officer. You can contact and speak to the tree officer for advice on if trees can or need to be protected.
So that would be one for Mr. and Mrs. Gray.
Councillor G.
Yeah, this is quite interesting and strange, and it's sort of revealing that the developer or the agent or whoever don't appear to be here to give their point of view, which is sort of is odd. But one of the things I did want, this idea of where the 17s come from, of course it's 30% of the overall total, isn't it? So it's 50. But I don't think we've got any choice given what's happened in the past with this application other than to go along with officers' recommendations tonight. And in effect, you're revoking what was a tendered option to give planning permission. You're revoking it because they haven't come up with their part of the deal. But one of the things I think is a bit of a health warning on this is with the new sort of housing targets that are in the air, you know, putting these onerous expectations on developers with affordable houses and Section 106, I think the game is changing. You know, because the council, if it wants to actually provide houses, it probably needs to look at whether it's doing in a sensible way with these arbitrary affordable housing targets. Because, you know, is that the best way of providing affordable houses? And if you actually want...
Gareth, I've got to intervene because it is questions, and
yeah,
I'd prefer this in the debate.
Yeah. So I'll bring it back. Yeah, no, I think it's fair to say, but it is kind of a question because I'm asking the council if it's needs to change its tactics, you know. But we'll bring that back later.
Right. Councillor Lees and then Councillor Boynton.
Sorry, Chair, I want to speak in debate, not question.
Thank you. John.
Thanks, Chair. Just want, I guess, reassurance that the reasons for refusal are absolutely sound. It's clearly an unusual situation. I'm trying to find a reason for doing it, and possibly, if we go with officers' recommendations now, without any 106 being signed, they'll go straight to appeal and hopefully get the application through that way and get round the 106. That's just a thought. So I just kind of want some reassurance that our grounds are solid.
My professional opinion is that the grounds are not only completely sound, but officers have got no other option. The policy of the policies, the local plan, national policies guide what contributions we seek. So they're based on evidence and data of needs of the district. I would venture that if they went straight to appeal, they'd have a pretty tough job to convince an inspector to approve it without any contributions. And I think really the bottom line is there is a mechanism for challenging contributions, which is a viability challenge. And if the agents had contacted us and said, we don't think the figures stack up anymore, and we've prepared a bona fide viability challenge with an accredited company, we could have sense checked that or gone to an outside body, such as David Newham, to check that. And that's the accepted procedure for challenging contributions, and they've not chosen to do that. They've just stated point blank, you're not going to get any contributions, so we don't have any choice.
If there are no other members that wish to ask specific questions, I'd like to go into debate now. Councillor Slack, are you prepared to move the officer recommendation of refusal?
Yeah, I'll move the officer's recommendation for refusal. Just to say that this has happened before previously on the other site. We didn't get affordable housing on the first site due to we refused it and it went to appeal. And on the appeal, the developers had a lot of consultation, and they said that you got to fill all the mine shafts in with concrete, and therefore it went against us and we lost it. So we didn't get any affordable houses on the first site. But this is nothing to be said about mine shafts and concrete, has it? So I'll definitely support that and move it.
Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Lees.
Yes, yeah, I'll second the officer's recommendation on this one. I think we've got to listen what the officers are telling us on this one. I was on the original planning visit. The agent was at the site visit. He came and spoke at the planning meeting, and I thought it was all good to go apart from the 106 agreement. But obviously, bearing in mind, when this comes back again, we should probably, going by what the speakers have said, etc., we may have a less density site, and of course we're going to have less affordable houses because we'll have less numbers of houses being built. So it's just to be mindful on that, but I will support the officers.
Thank you.
And second it. Thank you.
Councillor Peacock.
I'd just like to clarify that I did have a meeting with one of the parties, but it didn't really touch on the thing that we're deciding, which is whether or not this development is acceptable without any Section 106 contributions whatsoever. So that's why I'm still here and didn't leave the room, because it isn't. It was only made palatable by those Section 106 agreements, and I think we have to vote to refuse it.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Dobbs and then Councillor G.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Slack. Little insight there as to where we might be going. I'm seriously worried this will go to appeal. The inspector will decide on the amount of contributions, and it won't be what it was before. And clearly we've just seen that there's a track record for an adjacent site for exactly that. However, we do appear to be backed into a corner, and hopefully I'm not breaking anything legal, but just quoting from the paper, it appears that the developer says that he has signed, and it's the landowner who hasn't signed, making it even more complicated. So I don't know what we're against here, but it's certainly confusing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Councillor G.
Yeah, coming back to my earlier point, the point is with the council, it needs to realise that we're in the process of sort of changing our local plan and our housing targets to something much larger than they were designed at the time that this planning application was sort of passed, or not passed as it was. And this council has committed itself to huge housing targets without really having a new spatial strategy and deciding where those sites are going to be. Now, these particular houses, they're not a huge number, it's 57, they must have been deemed to be acceptable in terms of it being is it a tier 1 village or tier 2, I'm not sure, Middleton by Yorgrave. But by turning these down now, which I can see that we haven't really got any choice with that, but we're going to lose those houses. And somewhere we're going to have to find those houses again, because we need a lot more than that. You know, we don't need 57, we need about 600 a year. And it's difficult. There's lots of difficult decisions. And I think we're going to be in a totally new environment where the builders are pulling the strings. Obviously, in this case, they're almost, let me say it, a little bit cocky in their attitude and their tactics, because they probably think, you know, what are we going to do if it goes to appeal? So I think we need to be very careful and think about where and when and how we need these houses, and what is the best way. And, you know, is it a luxury to ask for 30% affordable houses? You know, I'd rather have nice new houses that young people, when they're aspiring, can afford to buy, and the properties aren't too expensive, because you do actually up the price of houses, market houses, by insisting on large numbers of affordable houses. It's the people who are paying mortgages on the other 70%. And the developers know that they're on tight budgets, and clearly they're not desperate to build these houses for us. But I think we're going to be desperate for some sites and some houses in the future.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor G, I'd just like to come back on that really. I mean, it's all very well straying into the territory of what is the local plan committee, but we are looking specifically at this application tonight. And if as local ward members and other councillors, we don't stand up for the principle of contributions from developers, which is clearly what's at stake now, then we might as well roll over and not have a function, because we're trying to assist both our existing residents and the new people who come into these developments and live there as well. And if we just throw away the cards and say you can't have extra places at doctors' surgeries, you can't have extra places at schools, you can't have affordable housing, then really we're just bowing in front of a demand from the government in this case, backed by developers who have no concept of local needs. So our role tonight is to actually stand up for some of those local needs.
Thank you, Councillor Shelley. Does any other member wish? It's been moved and seconded. Now, I will ask members to be very mindful of the advice we've received from our planning officers, and I do support that advice very firmly as chair of this committee. So, if no other member wishes to speak, let's put it to the test then. All those in favour of refusal, please show. Against? Abstentions? Then that was unanimous. Thank you very much. I don't want to extend the meeting, members. If that's okay, can we just round off now rather than take a break? Is that acceptable? Right. So we move on to then section 6 of the agenda, planning performance report. The report was circulated to us. Do any members wish to speak regarding this report on pages 85 to 96? If not, is someone prepared to move that this report be noted? That's been moved by Councillor Dermot and seconded by Councillor Dobbs. All those in favour, please show. Now, I think they've been now circulated. It's number 7, the appeals progress report, because on my agenda there wasn't one. So do members just want a moment just to double check and look through the appeals progress report?
Chair, there is actually an update on that. We did get an appeal decision on the former school site at Starkholmes Road. That was dismissed.
Good. Yeah. Anything from this report that any member wishes to raise? Councillor Buttle, Neil.
I'm sorry, Rosie, I didn't catch what you were saying about the former school site. The appeal was
Dismissed.
dismissed. Excellent. And do we actually have any idea as to when the planning inspectorates are likely to come back with something for Gritstone Road?
I attended online the session on Friday, which was a very robust day of evidence and cross-examination, etc. And the sequential test, additional planning issues, planning balance and conditions were all covered robustly. It was a good day. and I believe that we're looking at just the closing statements from the various barristers and from the WAG group, and that might only be a half a day at most session, and then the inspector will go away. The inspector asked for a couple of points of clarification from the various parties, and indicated the decision won't be too far away. If there was a couple of clarifications were received in July, they were hoping for a reasonably early decision, was the impression I got, to be honest. So it was good. The inspector was very good, and it was a very robust day. So I think everything was gone into in real detail, and we don't have an exact date, but I don't think it will be too long to get a decision.
So just to make sure I understand what you're saying there, our consultants on drainage have put a case out on the conditions that we're hoping to have accepted.
Yep, so there's been a lot of negotiation and backwards and forwards on the conditions that would, if the inspector was minded to allow the appeal, would then, to the council's mind, make it safe in terms of drainage and flood risk. And they were discussed, and the inspectors listened to the discussion and will take those away. And, you know, as in previous meetings, whatever anybody in the public inquiry said, it would be the inspector who decides at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Councillor Slack.
Beg your pardon. Land at Westerboroughs Lane, Middleton by Wirksworth. Has anything come over that appeal? Or is it still being processed?
According to this sheet, it still is, but I'll double check so that we have an up-to-date record for August committee.
Still being, okay.
And you'll get back in touch.
Yeah, in
Councillor
the
Slack,
meantime,
please.
I can let you know if that's
Yeah.
changed. I'll flag that one up. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As we approach 7:10, will you allow me to conclude the meeting, or is there any? Thank you for your forbearance on a very hot evening, and I conclude the meeting. Thank you, members. Thank you to all the officers as well.